Hello and welcome to today's episode of Rich, Simple, Human. I'm Lindsey Frances, sophrologist, psychologist and human behaviour change expert. I am sitting down today with James Eder, and the reason that James is on the show is not only because I've known him quite a long time and he's a personal friend, but he's just published his very first book, The Collision Code. So we're going to talk about that. But to keep you listening, let me just tell you how exciting this book is. The name gives it away, Collision. It's about serendipity, meeting people and allowing things to happen as the universe would have them planned. Now, that makes it sound a little bit woo-woo, and it's not. James is a very seasoned entrepreneur, founder of Student Beans, coach and speaker. And what he's got to say to you today will probably change everything that happens from now on in your life from the minute you finish listening. So stay tuned. And welcome to the show, James.
Morning, Lindsay. It's so great to be here. And you know what? I was thinking on reflection, kind of coming into this morning, the way that we met. And it's like the essence of everything the Collision Code stands for and everything in terms of being aware. And I was living in London. I decided to go on an adventure to Morsey in this beautiful valley in the French Alps. And one of the things that the book's all about is about showing up and contribution to your community. Often when we're introspective and think of ourselves, isolation, loneliness, being by ourselves is a very troubling time. And it's more and more common, not just especially in men, but at all different ages. And the whole concept of us being so digitally connected and disconnected at the same time. And so it was a real passion of mine that when I arrived in Morsey, I wanted to do something for the community. And it's funny reflecting on this. I put out to the community as a coach. I wanted to help people. I did this thing called chairlift chats, which I think has just a marvellous ring to it. And obviously the ski lift system lends itself to it. And the idea was we have a coaching session and then we go up on the chairlifts and either we integrate them a bit more, but ultimately it facilitates some space, some time, some intention and bringing people together. And you were one of the people, if you remember, a few years back now. Again, it's amazing how time passes. That unlocked a connection, an opportunity. And again, my unintended consequence, then we became clients. We were working together for a while. And that is, the essence of it is having something, showing up for something. And we're going to delve in deeper today. And I'm really looking forward to you asking kind of the ins and outs and kind of behind the scenes, behind the Collision Code, of the things that really took and really tangible outputs. My intention behind all of this and why I published a book was really to get a message out that, you are not alone, that there are opportunities that surround us every single day, everywhere. And one of those key insights and a number of stories in there is actually by showing up, by contributing something to the community, can then open things up in fantastic ways, not just from a work perspective, from connections, from friendships, and from that feeling that you have helped other people. And there was some research done around kind of often we're chasing tangible things, what we want to achieve, our job titles and everything. And actually, one is the experiences that we gain are hugely valuable, and that's what we really crave for. And the second one is also contribution. Is how we show up in the world where we contribute that actually we feel most fulfilled. So yeah, thank you so much for the invite, and I really look forward to exploring more, but I thought a useful context for me to share and start.
Absolutely, James. That's a brilliant way to jump straight in, because today's show is about showing people what they can do. Like you say, tangible actions that you can take. And you and I were lucky enough to bump into each other yesterday, and I was with one of my daughters and she instantly got it. I'd spoken to her about the book and she's navigating the world as a teenager, and showing up, connecting and contributing is so important. What I see my clients do, and I think a lot of listeners will agree, is the fear of showing up is huge now. We are in this digital age, we're hidden behind our screens. This sort of natural connection and contribution type lifestyle is being minimized. So we're on a screen, we're perhaps doing a lot of work digitally, we're not picking up the phone anymore. I used to work in a call centre before I graduated, selling coffee refills for coffee machines. You just pick up the phone and you had to make a conversation with somebody. You didn't phone up and say, hello, do you need more coffee? You're like, hey, it's Lindsay, how's it going? Have you seen the weather? Oh my gosh, Wimbledon's on. Just checking in with you. Like you go to the supermarket. And when I go back to the UK, I talk to the people on the checkout because I want to talk in English with people. And my husband's like rolling his eyes, like, why can't we use the can't we use the self-checkout? I'm like, I hate self-checkout. I want to have a conversation with somebody because I'm going to learn something. every time I speak to somebody, real humans, not AI humans, they're not humans, anybody listening, that person you're talking to on your ChatGPT is not human, we get connected. And I've been noticing, James, myself, as you know, I was a big dopamine chaser. I was after a hit, a high, an external lift for a lot of my life. I'm learning to navigate the world through oxytocin and not dopamine. And that is exactly what your book says. So anybody listening who's got problems with ADHD type issues, whether their energy is running too quick, whether they're feeling burnt out, keep listening, because James is about to reveal to you the secret of real human connection that will make you feel so much better. James, I've set the bar high. Over to you.
You know what? I need to, it's so funny being and sharing, and as you're speaking, and I was in touch with a friend yesterday, someone who's written another book. And this is often my style when I'm speaking to people about wanting to just, what's the aim? Having tangible outcomes, having tangible things you can go and do. And there's, I don't know, have you heard of the book Dose? Did you hear the Dose Effect?
No,
It's
I don't.
I feel like this kind of sister to the Collision Code. And he does trainings and sessions on it. And the Dose Effect, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and what's the last one? What's the E?
It's going to come to. I haven't read the whole book, but I have actually got a copy of it.
Okay, so the E, listeners, tell us what the E is. Come back to us. I know what it is. It will come to me. But anyway, the essence of it, the dose of it, putting your phone down, being engaged, the oxytocin that you get when you connect with someone, when that feeling that you can unlock it, and the real feeling versus just getting a notification, or again, that, dopamine rush, endorphins. That's it. E for endorphins. I knew it was somewhere.
Let's just recap. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. Read the book. You'll never need to take an antidepressant again. Caveat: I'm not a medical professional. James, it's a good book.
And so, yeah, it's amazing as these themes are coming up, and the reality of what the Collision Code touches upon is something that's so current, that's so relevant. Suddenly when you see, you've not seen a yellow car, and then suddenly you see a yellow car anywhere, or someone mentions something. Again, it's that awareness. I feel like that's, in terms of the code and the secrets behind it that we're going to delve into, it's just this excitement that it is possible. It's not as difficult as it seems. It's not as scary as it seems. And it is like the results can be instant, and you can feel that. And as you were saying, just as simple as in the supermarket line, and sharing something, asking a question, being open, all of these things. Can you just make, again, those small acts of kindness that often we hear about, or this kind of essence of paying for the coffee for the person behind you in the line, or something like this, it makes you feel good, and it contributes. And again, it doesn't need money. It can just be a thank you, a hello, keeping the door open, and all of these simple things that are kind of free for us to do, that we carry out in our lives. Often we're so concerned and worried about ourselves, what other people are thinking, which often they're not even thinking about you. All of these different things, but actually just being out and contributing in this way. And I just wanted to make that other book reference as well. TJ is fantastic as well.
We will link the book in the show notes, but if you're rushing, just remember, park it in the part of your brain that remembers things short term. The book Dose, The Dose Effect. In fact, James, I'm wondering if that might be another great podcast, because we seem to have lost, in this world where we've got more information now than we ever have in the history of mankind, we don't seem to be actually using the information terribly well. So we've got it. There are books, and I like a book because it's actually been published by a real human. It's not just a TikTok reel that has is not been tested. It's published, it's read, it's reread, it's prepared, it's thought of, it's referenced properly. It's not paid for by a medical company. If we were reading a medical review journal, which I'm beginning to mistrust some of these medical papers I'm reading. But anyway, who paid for this piece that tells us we shouldn't be doing X, Y, and Z? But you're so right. We've got to have this human connection. And my question to you, I think, is about people pleasing. I have a number of clients who come to me who are people pleasers, and they are actually so busy trying to please other people, i.e., giving in their minds. I'm giving, I'm serving, I'm contributing, I'm connecting, that they have lost anything on the inside. So can I challenge you to ask you the direct question of what advice do you give to people who are people pleasing and in their minds are already doing what you are suggesting they do in terms of connecting and colliding with others?
Look, the word that comes to me is about authenticity and about the motivations, why we're connecting. And you do hear this kind of, some people shudder at this dirty word, networking. And it's kind of, you go in and you think, what am I going to get from this? And how can I achieve or succeed? And actually, there's a repositioning, in the book that was shared by a fantastic lady called Amanda McKenzie, who was the CMO for Aviva at the time, the insurance company. And it's this whole concept of like net giving and thinking like, how can we give? How can we help? How can we, contribute? But I think, again, then in an authentic way that adds value, and that does fill us up. I was also listening for what you were sharing around, was it giving too much as well? Is there something in there? And I think, I love the phrase, putting your own oxygen mask on first. You're on the aeroplane, the direction is if something happens, put your own oxygen mask first and help other people. And until your mask is, firmly on and you're breathing the oxygen, it can put yourself at risk, which means then you can't help others. And I think that's really interesting. A few things as well, which I love about the book and thinking about, did just AI write it? When I started writing it, it was over 4 years ago now. And the intro of the book is that I was sitting in hospital with a prognosis of potentially needing a heart transplant. And I'd spoken to a few publishers and agents, and I just decided, you know what? I don't want to rely on other people for this. Yes, I don't have 100,000 followers on Instagram. They were all asking for these ridiculous things that ultimately what it was really for me was, I need to write this book and just get it out, because if something happens to me, this message is gone. And this is the most important thing. It was about showing up and it was sharing. And so the book hasn't been written with AI. Funnily enough, in the last year, 2024, as it was coming together, there were bits of it that I wrote it and then I asked for it to give me some feedback on it, or to facilitate, which I think is only how we're going to be the most successful, of using it as a tool just like any other, instead of being us or replicating us or giving us and so yes, it is all written by me, and in the last 12 months a little bit of nuances and help to get it over the line, but it's that essence of showing up and doing something that's aligned to your purpose and your values. And that's what I would, anyone that's just giving and it's too much, put your oxygen mask on first. And that was why, it took probably so long to get the book out, which I'm so pleased it's out now, but because I needed time to work through things for my health as well. And at times, I didn't have the motivation, the challenges with it, and the physical health side of things. But that vision of the importance of getting it out and being here. So yeah, those are the things I'd say.
I think it's absolutely brilliant, because put your own oxygen mask on first and don't kid yourself. So the conversations I have often is, well, I went to the gym, Lindsey, and I ate healthy and I did this and I did that so I can keep serving everybody else. And I'm like, your ego is having an absolute field day here, because you don't even know what you want. You're just delivering to other people, thinking you're doing, and the clue is in the title of some of the podcasts, rich, simple human, the art of being a human being and not a human doing. This doing is not being. And the Collision Code talks about being present, being available, being connected. It doesn't say doing available, do it. There's a very big difference. And I was actually reading some of the book yesterday whilst I was with my daughter. And for a moment I picked up a text message that was a little bit tricky. And I just noticed, because I've trained myself to do this over the last 5 years, where is my brain? I have an opportunity now, it's the summer holidays as we're recording this, to be present with her, or I can be in my thoughts about your book, or I can be in my thoughts about this annoying situation. And I was able to switch into being present. I just wish we could teach people to do that, because it changes everything. Take every thought captive. Here I am in my thoughts. I'm not in my body, at the pool where I was. And I just brought myself back, turned my attention away from these two situations, your book and the other piece, and turned back towards the connection and the relationship. That is being, not doing.
It's so interesting, because again, it takes that awareness and to catch ourselves. And I think that's, key insight in terms of what you're sharing. It's like so many of us are so wrapped up in that next thing and that distraction and everything. And again, that coming back, being present, and that's why, I'm a big fan of meditation and kind of that breath, so quickly. You sit for a minute and it feels like forever when you just take it and you're like, right, I'm going to time a minute. Oh my God, or that exercise, it's fun, right? Everyone be quiet and start speaking, say something when you think a minute's up. And, it it's just this weird, how we've been, I say, manipulated, programmed, done, where we then don't, society. It's just how it's just accelerated at such a pace that we find it very difficult to be really present in the moment. And it reminds me, and I think I do mention about a phrase, and this has been attributed to so many people, the concept of anxiety and depression. And being in the moment, which we're often not, you've got anxiety that's worrying about the future, that's bringing it into today. And then you've got the depression that's something's happened and you're thinking about it and ruminating about it and you're bringing the past into today. And it's like, we're not right now in this moment. I've got this heart condition, which I've already mentioned. But right now, I'm just absolutely great. I'm on, woken up this morning on a podcast with you, talking about my new book release and all different themes that are all so related about living with intention, being in the moment, being purposeful. And so it is a skill, but I think the key thing is starting, like with many things, is, having the awareness that what's the impact? You talked about your daughter. What's the impact of you being distracted with that text message, bring that in, disrupting that connection, that community, that time that you've got that you just can't get back? And so I think it's really insightful kind of awareness, and hopefully those listening, you catch yourself. I challenge you in the next day, just think about what you're doing, and when your awareness has been, even just that conversation and thinking about this, when your awareness then suddenly gets ripped away and then you're thinking about something else and how that's impacting your relationships or the people that you're working with. And I think that could be a really insight, and maybe just jot down or keep a journal of that and how it was, and think, how could you do it differently?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think people have trained themselves to see where their brain and their mind is. So they're allowing their thoughts to run wild, and they're just thinking all the time. When you take those thoughts captive, is this thought about the present moment, or is it about the past, which can be very depressing, or is it about the future, which is where anxiety lives, as you've said? When we stay in that present moment, that's where all the joy and pleasure in life is. I want to be happy.
And the irony is, I know there's a bit the power of now. That's what we've got. It's right now. That's it. There's no, that's what we've got. And that's these moments that we should be cherishing. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but it's just like that.
I agree. I totally agree with you, James. And I think now is probably a good time to ask you about your mental approach and physical approach to your own health condition, because you could be in a very different position than you are right now. And I wonder if you'd be happy just to share on that for people that are listening, thinking, well, I can't really do this, Lindsey, because I've got X, Y, and Z wrong with me physically, or I've got this situation relationally, or I've got financial worries, or I've got this business. I interviewed a founder recently, the business had collapsed. Millions and millions of pounds have been lost. These are very difficult things to navigate, James. What are your top tips? Because your own experience has not been a rosy walk in the park.
No, it hasn't. And it's really interesting. I was really triggered last night. I was having a conversation with someone about wanting to do something and not being able to. And I really just challenged them on it and said, look, I think sometimes we're not clear of what we really want. So then we say we want something, and then we create an excuse behind it that, oh no, it's not possible. And I was saying, well, what's the goal? Start with the end in mind. Again, another favourite book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it's a thing as a coach that just constantly, I think my clients are bored of hearing me say it. If they, they come to me with something and I'm like, start with the end in mind. What, where are you? What's the time frame, and what's already happened? And thinking about how can we work backwards from that, and not allowing kind of these, again, all these, I'm maybe a bit brutal saying, those different scenarios that you've shared, companies going under, challenging relationships, health issues, that would make people stop in their footsteps and be like, it's not possible, I can't do it. And, so kind of a bit about the condition. Kind of 7 years ago, I fainted. I was in a theme park. And I thought, I was running a startup at the time. So again, potted background, 20 years ago, which I still can't believe, was I graduated and set up this company called Student Beans. It's now called Pion, which is a parent brand, and it's all around helping students kind of save money and verification and advertising solutions and insights for different demographics now, not just students. And started with my brother. I left 10 years ago day to day. And I think, again, building this into the conversation and story, fantastic guy has actually, I still even can't believe, has written the foreword of the book, a guy called David Taylor. Another book reference called The Naked Leader, which is imagine if you couldn't fail. Who would you be? Where would you go? And what would you do? And at the age of 22, when you hear something like that, it's not just about thinking positively or hugging trees and hoping for the best. It was, if it's not going to fail, I'm going to go out and I'm going to make this work, and I'm going to put everything, into this. And I did, and the business today I left after 10 years day to day, just to be clear. I founded it with my co-founder and brother, who's absolutely incredible, called Michael, an amazing operator. But there's over 250 people in that company now today. And I left day to day because I was going and giving talks about entrepreneurship and enterprise. And, interestingly, a lot of the talks and speeches is not about the business. It's actually about the precursor to the things I did, the foundations that anyone can do. You mentioned about working in a call center. And it's one of the foundational stories in the book as well about, I worked at Gala Bingo, selling bingo membership, which is not sexy or exciting, but the foundations of having to call is around 250 people a day, being told no over 700 times a day, because our task was to get them to say no 3 times. And then I'm getting the yeses, the 10% who said yes every day. And that kind of brutality of 6 weeks, the resilience, the learning, the business lessons. And anyone listening to this who wants some resilience training, get a job in a call. It sounds crazy, but get a part-time job, get 1 evening a week, call center, or even a support center, a charity helpline or something like that. That helps, all of these things, the foundations of one of the pillars of the code, which we've not again talked about, was about building this confidence. It's putting us, the best way we're prepared to do something is when we've done it once. And not just when we've done it once, when we've done it 100,000 or 1,000 times, and I know Malcolm Gladwell has 10,000 hours. Where are you now? People think, oh, I'm too old. Again, another excuse. I can't do it because I'm too old. Again, all the examples, whether it be Yozushi, Simon Woodruff, I think he started it in his 50s, Yozushi. And look at that brand now. So all of these, I guess I'm compounding a whole load of different stories, as I often do in book references. But when I was diagnosed, I was in a theme park 7 years ago, and I was running actually another business at the time called Causa, which was like a location-based LinkedIn. And the irony of all this stuff, the legacy really lives on in the book, that the essence and the code behind that was how we can give people, I'm going to drop the bomb now, is the 3, it's permission, confidence, and context. And so when I was speaking 10 years ago about all of these different elements and about business, what I realized is, if it wasn't going to fail, I had this other business idea to go and explore. And I said to my business partner, Michael, at the time, Michael, listen, I've just got this in me. And I was speaking to some investors, and investors said, look, if you go for this and you leave Student Beans day to day full time, I will give you some money to invest in this new startup. And it was an opportunity. It was a moment in time. And I just thought, I love what my first business is doing. And at the same time, I felt like I'm an innovator, a visionary, starting a business and running one, 2 very different things. And I was very clear with my brother, look, I need to go and explore this, and with his blessing. And I'm so grateful again for him, the team, and I write it in the book, everything they've done and do to have built that business since I left. But it was that Imagine If You Couldn't Fail with David Taylor again that triggered me. I saw him speak again over 20 years ago. And interestingly, I reached out to him. I read his book, 2003. A friend gave me his book. Again, think about the power of gifting. Gave me his book. I read his book on the aeroplane going to the Philippines on a charity placement. And I emailed him saying, David, this is so inspiring, so amazing. Would you mind meeting with me? And I remember after I met, he said to me, I was tempted not to meet you, but there was something authentic, genuine, and real that I was just, I asked the question. And, it's that phrase, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And I just think, had I not taken that, and then we met, and I've worked with him, collaborated with him over the last 20 years. And again, for him now to be writing the foreword of the book, which is still completely mind-blowing. So coming back to that second company I was running, I started it, we raised money, I launched it, we had about 3,000 users, and then I was in a theme park, fainted, and I hit my head. And I flew back to the UK. Also, random story, Rory Sutherland, who is an absolute legend in the marketing world, has written on the back of the book as one of the testimonials for the book. And I randomly met him again at the airport. I've mentioned permission, confidence, and context. So this, again, context, time and time again, comes up, which is allowing to unlock that connectivity. So the context was Rory had worked at one of our events that we'd organised. So I had a way in, I had something to say, instead of just being often starstruck by these people and kind of standing nervously thinking, what should I say? What should I say? Actually just having something that I was confident in, because it was true that he had spoken at these events. So I went up to him, Rory, I know we don't know each other personally, but you spoke at this. Oh, yes. And then we had this fantastic conversation, and we exchanged then communication afterwards. And I was as the book was coming together, running an event. And it was a partner that works with Rory, and I said to him, can I be in touch about the book? He said, sure. And, I sent Rory a message, and it was amazing. And he replied. I got an auto response saying, I'm writing a book at the moment. Sorry, I can't reply. 10 minutes later, I get a reply. James, you know what's so interesting about your book and Serendipity? So many people talk about it's how things happen. It's how innovation happens. It's how the world progresses. And yet, no one really talks about how we can make it happen more often. There's more just an afterthought about it, which I think is really interesting. So he said, I'd love to read the book more. Please send it through. And then he's given me now this fantastic testimonial. So I know I'm weaving lots of things in here, but coming back, your question you asked about the heart stuff is, I went to the doctor after I'd fainted in the theme park, and they said to me, your blood pressure's a bit low sitting down to standing up. Go and have an ECG done at the hospital. And I thought, fair enough. Drove my car, parked to pay a display, get into the hospital, do the ECG. Hold on, sir, we just need to get a specialist in. Has anyone died in your family of a heart attack at a young age? Okay, we need to do an ultrasound. So you okay with that? I'm like, okay, fine. Yeah, the car's still got some time on that. Fine. They did the ultrasound. You can't leave hospital. And I'm like, my car's on pay and display. Literally is, again, maybe this funny distraction for me. And he said, well, how far away do you live? Okay, move the car, but come and check yourself into A&E. This is serious. And go back to A&E, they checked me in. And then I ended up in hospital for 3 days. And I got diagnosed with something called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. And it's the thickness of the heart. It's the thing that marathon runners and footballers suddenly collapse and die from. It is potentially life-threatening. Funny enough, 1 in 500 people have it in the UK. But for many people, it's undiagnosed. So Sir David Frost's son, David Frost died having had the condition, and his son, they hadn't done the tests, and it's genetic. And his son was running before breakfast on a Sunday morning, suddenly collapsed and died. And so they set up a foundation to help and donated, I think it was over £1 million to help people just get tested. So if you've got any of these symptoms, breathlessness, swelling of your feet, or kind of body weight kind of changes. But the main thing actually is just even walking on a small incline. I thought I was fit, young, healthy, take on the world, run startups, work 18-hour days, do everything and anything. And then suddenly this kind of reality kind of bombshell hits me that, I've got this thing that I've had all my life. And I look back at these moments where I was doing cross country at school, which I hated. The irony is I hated sport. My body, I think, just kept telling me, don't do this. And yet I just ignored it. That was, I just thought, I'm just a bit tired and I'm a bit, I'm a bit unfit, and that, because I didn't really do much sport. And every time I did it, I just didn't enjoy it. Anyway, so the diagnosis came, and then they said 21st of September that year, which is 2017, they said I might need a heart transplant. And my world just fell apart. You think, they also said, your follow-up appointment's in January. And I said, how are you meant to cope with these things and running a startup? And, my world kind of went again a little bit in I'm going to say downward spiral and decline, and thinking kind of what's important. And I distracted myself. I threw myself into my startup. I said to my investors, look, this has happened, but many people live a full life with it. It's okay. And, I guess we fake it till we make it. We tell ourselves these things, and I think, in hindsight, you did the things that you could do. We went into survival mode of like, how can I get through this? But something again related in the collision code, I came back home, and, one of the great ways of connecting with people, Airbnb, listing your home, traveling, meeting other people. There are so many different examples of this. But I, at the time, was renting out just one of my rooms. I've got 2 beds in London, and rented out one of my rooms on Airbnb. And I get home from the doctor's appointment with this bombshell. You're going to need a heart transplant review. Papworth, which is the most unbelievable hospital in the UK. They do 1 in 5 heart transplants a year. So there are about 500 a year in the UK. Wow. Papworth do 100 of those. And I get home and I speak to this guy. And I said, what are you working on at the moment? How's day? Yeah, not bad. How was your day? I don't want to just share the news with a complete stranger that I've just had this diagnosis or concern. So what are you up to? He's like, I'm working on a new documentary. Oh, that's interesting. And I was like, what's it about? He's like, well, actually, it's the 50th anniversary of the world's first successful heart transplant.
How funny.
And I've got goosebumps again. I just think, what, but some people are listening to go, oh, well, so what? It's a coincidence. But actually what you need to hear in that moment, in that, like, literally, and again, the goose pimples still keep giving, I just think I needed to hear that. And, 50 years ago, I had no, this is the first time I've really heard or taught, transplants and this concept. And like, obviously I'd heard about them before, but not in the same personal way. And then to hear someone just say, 50 years ago was the first successful one. It was a South African guy. And you're just like, wow, I just felt like in that moment, things are going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's just, and like, again, talk about the universe and serendipity and unlocking it. And, some of the examples in the book are like that, where you can just think, that's just chance. It's just, but again, being open to it, like having that person staying there, that, all the setup and the lineup of doing that, it makes, there's another book, I'm not sure the author of it, but we can find it, called, The Luck Factor. And it's like, even just by leaving the house, you're going to be more lucky because you're more open to chances, to serendipity, to things happening. And similarly, even by renting out your spare room or doing these things, enables, there's another fantastic app called Olio, which is about food sharing or like food waste. So if you've got something left over, again, it's an opportunity to connect someone, not to manipulate it or think, oh, who am I going to meet, as you're doing it. But ultimately, and I ended up ordering 4 pears. I thought they were called quints, and I thought they were pears because they looked like pears, and they arrived and they were like these quints, which I didn't really know what to do with. So I put them on Olio, and with half an hour, 4 people requested them. This guy turns up at my door. I'm like, what are you going to do with them? He's like, I'm going to make maybe some jam or a quince tart. I'm like, of course you are. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm now his best friend or, we go out for drinks every week, but it was that moment, that interaction, those things, and just being open to them. So
Human connection, James, and you've just described a moment there, and thank you for sharing that with your housemate, because what was such big news to you, there you are with this person who's got quite a lot of experience of the heart transplant history in your very home. You could have come home and gone into your bedroom with a bottle of wine and or perhaps some other sort of distracting method of your choice. To those that do that, who know they shouldn't be. And isolated. And of course, that's really, really unhelpful, because the human connection is where everything is happening. But it does take some confidence, like you say, to be able to say, well, I'm just going to share this and see what happens.
Coming back to your question, though, because you asked me, how to get through it, what are those tips or things? One of the reasons why I wrote the book, why do we wait for something bad to happen to ourselves or someone we know to then make a change that we really know that we need or want to take? And so, the tangibility after it, look, one was getting support, and from a therapy perspective, from an environment, from family and friends, and leaning on people, and then working it through and adjust, there was a time of adjustment, but then kind of getting through that. I think what really got me, one, I've mentioned it already, was around contribution, thinking how can you help other people in your situation as well. A really simple thing. I went to the hospital. They didn't have any pens. They kept running out of pens. And I had just so many, you just accumulate. It was one of the things, for some reason, probably had about 300-400 pens in my flat, and old promotional pens from conferences. Anyway, I said to the lady, next time I come, I'll bring you a bag of pens. And like my next appointment, I go in, I take these pens. She thought she'd won the lottery. She was like, and the funniest thing, because I asked for her, and then the other person at reception kind of took the bag, and then the lady had asked for come. She's like, no, those are mine. I'm going to distribute them. I'm going to make sure, these. She was like so possessive in ownership of it. It was so funny to see. But it was just like a really simple thing in a moment. I could see something need. I had something fine, and so it's that shift of thinking, woe me, what about myself? And then like taking it, we take things for granted. And I've been forced, and I think this is a really interesting forcing function. And I've seen various, exercises and things. And again, we'll put the link, if we can, Lindsey, about Wait But Why. They've got the grid of your life in basically one A4 sheet of how many weeks we live. And there's also, it's the 4,000 weeks? I think it's 4,000 weeks. All of these things that like bring this, like the confrontation of our mortality. And look, COVID, for a lot of people, there was a big shift for a lot of people that, being surrounded by the news and the headlines and people that we knew or people that we lost. And, it was just kind of elevated for so many people. And my condition, I discovered kind of a year plus before COVID. So I feel like I had this head start. And that's, given me such an amazing, like the silver lining is every 3 to 6 months I'm at the hospital, they're like, you don't need a transplant now, come back in 6 months. And in a weird way, there's a bit of freedom to that. And it helps me decide what's important, what's not, what do I really want to do. And I think, again, just being that authentic self, being honest with yourself, and it helps knowing what to say no to, and like thinking about what gives you energy and what doesn't. And, you know, I leave certain situations, I'm like, that didn't give me energy, I don't want to do that again. And then what does give me energy, and where am I? So hopefully a number of nuggets in there, like tangible things that have helped get me through. You know, I've also done a video series of my heart health, which is called Heart Matters Living with Intention. Again, there'll be a link in there. And that vulnerably shares my whole heart journey. Why did I do it? If someone else is suffering, not just from a chronic heart condition or my heart condition, to raise awareness, but also anyone that's working through a chronic condition, of what are the things. And you know, the doctor said to me, you're unlike any of my other patients, they said. We said you'd need a transplant in the next 3 to 5 years. I'm now in year 7. And I feel I just had one of my most recent tests with heart, something called BNP protein level, that when you've had a heart attack or your heart's under pressure, it's raised. When I was the illest I've been, which was 4 years ago, I was bedridden for about a month, lived with my dad. They said I should go on the list then. My most recent, I've got better since then, that level, the BNP protein, you don't really need to know what it is, but it's a marker. It was at 14,000. When I was first diagnosed, it was over 3,000. My most recent one, it was below 2,000.
Wow.
I can't emphasize, you know, it's the life choices, it's the decisions. It's like I've been given this like gift to be in the moment, to make these decisions. And the other question I keep coming up with is, like, how much is enough? How much do you really need? And this constant chasing that I'm seeing around me of people not having time to enjoy the money that they've made so far, thinking, oh, well, I'll do it later. You know, being diagnosed at 34, you're just like, when is later and how much is enough? And, you know, grateful that I can do the work I love and do, that I can, again, the contribution. You know, that's the other. I've had my clients, interestingly, coaching journey side of things. When I first was diagnosed, and I then stopped the company. I said to my investors, I carried on, and then I couldn't carry on anymore. And it pains me still, you know, I've lost people's money and like that was, but they're like, look, we're grown-ups, we're investors, we get it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it. They were amazing, that the support that they gave. But someone contacted me some advice, and I ended up doing a session with them. And I said, you know what, if I do this as a job, you know, would you pay me? And I said, yeah, and I decided to do this pay as you value methodology. People pay me at the beginning, whatever they want to pay me. And the guy was like, sure, anyway, pay me. It was a great amount. He said, I want to do once a week. And he was like my first client that just like arrived. And even though I was ill, I've only ever cancelled one appointment, like one client test. So even when I was bedridden, I'd get up, I'd have a shower, I'd be on the call for the client, and I'd share vulnerably with my clients as well. Like my motivation, why am I a coach? I'm not in a position to run a startup today, but I want to help others. And like that superseded everything. That got me out of bed, the motivation, the contribution. And the simple plan was, if I can have one client a day, 5 days a week, something to get up for, like, and I know I can do more, and I have done, and, you know, my energy where it ebbs and flows, but it gives me the freedom to do what I need to do. It's enough to enable me to live in a way that I want and need to live. And like, that's powerful work. And I'm not chasing, and I don't update LinkedIn every day and Facebook and doing all the things. Again, with my updates, it's very intentional, like the book launch. That was like my first one in a while. I was like, it's happening, the book unveiling in the box of books. It was so exciting. But it's just the value and power of like being in the moment, living for now. And this, it's a gift I've been given. And I've got to look at it like that, because otherwise there's no other way.
James, somebody said to me last week, the exclusivity of waking up every morning. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, it doesn't happen to everybody. You woke up this morning, I woke up this morning super excited to talk to you because I love what I do. And I hear a lot of people, you know, going on about burnout, not going on, but talking about it. In my opinion, burnout is a lack of passion. It's a lack of passion and a lack of purpose. And it sort of dies a death, and you're left with this sort of grind. And then you burn out. You've stopped putting grease on the wheels.
That concept of, you know, people go, I don't have time to do that. And actually, someone shared it with me a few years ago, it's about, I don't have energy to do it. It's like we've got, you know, they always say, you know, if you want something done, give it to the busy person. If I want it, like, you've got time. but you don't have the energy. And why don't you have
I
the energy? Doing things. Yeah.
I always ask my clients to show me their screen time when they say that. I say, God,
Yeah.
that's really bad, isn't it? Just go on your phone. I see you've got an iPhone there. Can you show me your screen time? And then, of course, they go 4 hours or whatever. And I'm like, wow. Okay, so could you reuse any of that time? Well, I'm busy posting on social media. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And I say, that's great. But back to your point, let's just clarify why you're doing that. Because we get into these subconscious defaults. I'm just posting because that's what I have to do. Do you really? Is that really going to fill up what you've just said? Contribution, connection, and confidence? Or is it just a default behavior that you've got? It's a bit like running, isn't it? I mean, I'm training at the moment for a big bike ride. How much do you really have to train? And if I ever say to myself, I have to, I say to myself, no, I don't, I choose to. I don't have to do anything. Nobody's got a gun to my head saying, go out and ride for another 4 hours. And if I don't have 4 hours, I could just ride for 2 and ride a bit harder. It's crazy.
100%. That word, I don't want to kind of ignore it or oversee it, brush briefly over it, this word choice. And I think this is so interesting. Years ago in the business, and then David Taylor actually was a leadership training that I was on with him. And I remember there were 14 of us in the business at the time, working with my brother. And I went on the program, and I came back to the office like, Michael, we don't currently have the choice not to be here. The vision for creating a business, there's legacy, there's impact, there's, how can you, build a brand, all of these things. But ultimately, it's also time, right? Like the value that you're building something. And some people go, well, I'll have time when I finish. Yeah, that's fine. But that position where you're starting and you're choosing to, and suddenly I've got 14 employees that I need to fund. I'm doing all the sales. It's a very challenging time. And if I don't go to work today, this week, then we'll have to lay people off, or I can't, it's all reliant on me, it felt at the time. And I don't have the choice. And so it was about, not that I wanted to leave at the time, it was 5 years in and I loved what I was doing most of the time, but I was feeling under a huge amount of pressure and stress as a startup founder and wanting to, I guess I live my best life, enjoy it as well. So it was like that shift and just going, okay, how can I choose this instead of feeling like I have to? And we all can, as you said, no one's forcing you, as you use that analogy, gun to your head. So the choice was, I then came back and I realized that we needed 5 people to do my job. And that was, I was doing the invoicing, I was doing the advertising delivery, I was doing the creatives, I literally anything, everything, and I shouldn't have been doing, definitely not the finances. Crazy story, we were sending out invoices with 987654321 as the VAT number for, I think, the first 3 years of the business, because it was a template that I used. And one of our clients goes, is that really your VAT number? And I failed some of I did retake them, but I failed some of my finance exams my first year of university. I am not a finance guy. I know we should make more money than we spend. That is my principles of finance. But I shouldn't have been doing those things. And the business was worse for it because instead of me, and the irony about the collision code, instead of me doing the invoicing and following up or whatever, I should be out. I should be meeting people. I should be connecting. I should be adding value. And every time I was out of the office, more business would come in. So then, I should have been out. And it's then coming back to that choice. And we got 5 people, and then I was able to choose: do I want to go to work today or not? If I do, yeah.
Every founder I speak to will say the same, James. Oh, I don't have a choice. I can't slow down. I can't stop. I can't pause. And, research and science tells us that if you are working from this really highly activated part of your nervous system, the fight or flight part of your brain, the amygdala, is firing, you've lost all your creativity and your decision-making power. So, I say to people, you can't afford not to. You have got to pause to think. You've got to pause to make a decision. No, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. And it's detrimental to your business. It would be a bit like, the picture that comes to mind is a taxi driver. I'm doing school runs, but I'm going to drive at 90 miles an hour. No, you're not. It's really bloody dangerous. Don't do it. Yeah. And founders, this conversation about I have to keep going, I have to keep going. Yes, I understand that. You are responsible, but it is simply not sensible and not sustainable not to pause. And
the word that comes to mind, again, it's about balance. And it's just, I also call, I've known to be said, I say again, that kind of work-life balance. For me, it's just life, whether you're enjoying it or not. And that balance comes when things are attuned and in line, and you've got, this equilibrium of what you're doing, how you're spending your time. And again, that coming back down to the energy. When I was doing those 18-hour crazy days and breakfasting, networking, breakfast, lunch and dinner, it didn't feel like work. I got energy from people, and that's, again, being attuned. I know there'll be introverts listening and extroverts listening, but it's about listening to yourself and putting yourself in those right environments where then you do have that balance and being aware, what it takes to get that balance.
I think there's also a conversation there about, is this energizing me or not? The question is it energizing you with a dopamine kick? And I'm a big fan of, let's see how many networking events can I do? How many people can I, speak to? And then I have to check myself because, yes, I'm pretending to be energized. Actually, I'm just scaring myself to death and giving myself an adrenaline kick. And I know that's what I do. It's a bit like, jumping over the bar. I just keep lifting it to see how big a kicks I can get. If you are a founder or an entrepreneur like that, stop, wind back and think about the difference, and this is where a coach is so important, because you ask the right questions and so do I. We're in this talking about, okay, let's visualize the future. Sophrology coaching is very, very apt at saying, what does the end in mind look like? What is the vision? Where are you going? What do you really want? James, something you say a lot, and we're coming to the end of the show, but I just want to ask you is, you often say in your book, ask for what you want. Be clear about what you want and go and ask for it. So I've been applying this to myself. Am I actually going out into the marketplace, into the world, into my community, into my network, and asking for what I want? And of course, the reality is no, because I haven't clarified what it is I want, so I can't go and ask for it. What would you say to people that need to test themselves with that?
So yeah, again, it's that test, and what's interesting about framing it and that start with the end in mind. Okay, imagine you've got everything that you think you're asking for. Is that, how will you feel? Choose a timeline. So it's, 31st of December 2025 or 31st of December 2026. What's happened? What are the things, if you're doing all the things that you are doing right now, will you get to that outcome? And if you're standing there and you've achieved it, or how do you think you'll feel? And what is it? And again, look, this stuff comes down to that alignment of, what's your purpose? What are you trying to achieve? And it's interesting as well. Someone was sharing, it was there are different variations of this, but the gap between, our expectations and the reality, and that the dysfunction or the unhappiness comes from when we're disassociated between those, the gap and the reality. And so it's like trying to understand, what your expectations are, what you want, and is that what you really want? Because often, again, there's this chasing of these goals that we think we want, and we call them kind of means goals. And again, there's in Mind Valley Vishen, Lakhani, who's the founder of Mind Valley, has got this great exercise, which again, happy to reference to, and it's a great video of him identifying, the means goals versus the end goals. So we think that we want all of these different, this job title, this money, this things, but the end goals, what do we really want to want? And there's a really simple exercise, which I've mentioned already. I always forget the third one, but the experiences that we want and the ways that we want to contribute, like that's what's really interesting. Actually, most happiest and successful people have identified those things. And so what I would do is kind of almost a sense check. It's a great 90-second exercise for each of those. There's 3 of them, and I always forget the third one. So, but we've got the 2, and there'll be a link to this. But it's literally 90 seconds. What are the experiences that you want? And be broad in. And what's great about it then has some prompt questions to help you understand like what that exercise is. But just very quickly off your top, and what's interesting, there'll be overlaps then for each of the things that you want to experience, how you want to contribute, and then hopefully then some alignment, then being clearer with yourself, what it is that you really want. And also you mentioned ego earlier about like, is it your ego or is it actually taking a step back? And, I've done a huge amount of work from a therapy perspective, working myself and thinking about, I used to be the person, I needed to be on the front stage, standing and getting, that elevated feeling of being the one known in the room. And you're like, where did that come from? That was this drive of growing up, needing that validation and the ego piece. But actually the freedom that you get going, that's not me. I don't need to do that. I love doing it. I love the impact that I can have. And that's the ripple effect. And, still I meet people years later, they send me a message, I saw you speak at this event, or I did this, and thank you for your input. And like, that's the authenticity coming through. That's the, you're holding the space for yourself and showing up for yourself in a genuine, authentic way without chasing, without the ego. And I just feel so light living in this way compared to what I was doing before, chasing.
Consciousness is key, and sophrology is the practice of consciousness in harmony. When you are conscious that you are chasing, when you are conscious that you are gripping and grabbing, when you are conscious that you are not present, everything changes. And it's that perspective piece that the book and the work that I do it really, really helps people. So I think, James, to close, I'm going to urge everybody to go onto Amazon and order the book. You are also making a massive contribution to the Heart Foundation, is that right, as your chosen charity?
Yeah, the British Heart Foundation and Cardiomyopathy UK.
So these are really, really key charities. So please go and buy the book. You will learn loads. If you have children, you will also learn lots of interesting things to say to them. And that's another podcast, James. But I've been using it with my own kids, like asking them challenging questions. And one of them was, I've read this really book. And it says, how do you turn a stranger into a friend? I'm totally paraphrasing, by the way. And they gave me a really good answer. And I was like, that's really, that's a really interesting conversation, isn't it? And then I had a conversation about real friends or deal friends. What's the difference? Yeah. Can you feel the difference when you've got a deal friend and a real friend? Because we do, we have genuine friendships and then we have deal friendships. And that's also okay. But you need to know the difference. And something you just said as well, I'd like to just remind people of the beautiful sort of phrase about disappointment. Disappointment is reality minus expectation. So when your reality doesn't meet your expectation, you will be disappointed. Now, I'm not saying go around and be overly realistic or negative, but just bear that in mind, because when we are really engaged in something and then we've got our energy moving forwards, we actually raise the game of what happens. And I'm not talking about manifesting. I'm talking about positive mindset, not living from a place of lack, not having that sort of victim mentality. And then everything else will happen for you. James, as we close the show, we've got loads of links that we're going to put into the show notes. Can I ask you just to share anything else or any takeaways you'd like to leave people with?
Yeah, look, it's been really, I've been meandered, and I know I've shared a lot today. But I think that the key things are the collision code for me. Again, I said it, it was all about getting this message out of what's important, but it all lives in, taking action and living with intention. And if you're not happy with where you're at and what you're doing, you need to make a change. And a change, there's nothing wrong with you. It's all about being more you. It's about leaning into who you are, being in that authenticity. And I mentioned this in the book, my favourite kind of Steve Jobs quote was in a speech he gave, and it was talking about, if you wake up in the morning 2 days in a row and you're not happy with what you're doing, you've got to make a change. And like that, we get so comfortable. And there's the analogy with the frog in the boiling water. So you put the frog in the water and it's swimming around, and you heat it up, and it will die. And then if you had the boiling water and you put the frog in, it will jump out immediately. And so many of us get stuck. We don't feel like we've got choice. So listen, if it's a call to action, have that awareness. Why, don't wait for yourself to be ill or someone else around you or to be confronted with this. I guess use this podcast, use this video as a wake-up call to think, what is it that I really, really want? What, living with intention. And there's an exercise in the book that you look at your ideal year, month, week, day, because again, it changes perhaps throughout the seasons of what it is that you want to do. And, there's this video of 86,400 seconds, the number of seconds there are in a day. And imagine your life was like a bank account and it was full, $86,400, pounds, euros, whatever you deal in at the beginning of the day. And it had to be spent. And that's life. That's what we get. It's like the bank of life. And what I love around it is like, look, if today wasn't your perfect day, have a bit of reflection. What would I change? What would I do differently? And we get to do it all over again the next day, but with those learnings. And like, I say it's only as simple as that. It's like, look, life is short. We've no idea. It's all good. It's happening. They say we begin dying the day that we're born. And it's like, the world is a great place. I know there's lots of challenges around, lots of kind of things going on that are kind of really confronting and challenging. But at the end of the day, like, I see people say governments need to do this. I believe in the Collision Code, it's all about this self-leadership. What can we do? How can we contribute? How can we show up? And it starts by showing up for ourselves. And there's just a short poem I like to share. I think it's attributed to anyone or it's unknown, but this idea that when I grew when I grew up, I wanted to change the world, and I tried to change the world, and that didn't work. I then tried to change my country, and that didn't work. I then tried to change my city, it didn't work. Tried to change my town, it didn't work. Tried to change my family, and that didn't work. But realised if I change myself, then I can change my family. And if I change my family, I can change my town. Change my town, I can change my country. Change my country, I can change the world. And I do think it all starts with us being intentional and enabling us and giving us, the permission to change. And again, coming back to the code, the permission to change and the confidence, the best time you're ready to do something is when you've done it once, and that's the learning. And then the context is even just using the book. If you read the book or you listen to, if you listen to the podcast, you say to someone, I listened to this podcast today and it said, actually, my challenge, I'm going to go and speak to someone I don't know. Do you mind if I say hello? And so blame me. If you don't need my permission. You've got to give yourself permission. And the confidence to practice and that context, you can now use this podcast as a context, I'm going to say, to talk to anyone. So really thank you for listening, and feel free to connect and be in touch.
James, that's absolutely amazing. Thank you so, so much. And I am super, super excited to share all of those links. James is available on LinkedIn. You can find him wherever you are finding this show. You can find him on various platforms. And if you would like to reach out to me and talk about sophrology or any of the methods and techniques that we've talked about today, please get in touch. James, until next time, thank you so much. If you've enjoyed Rich Simple Human, please do share, subscribe and like. Everything helps to share further the work that we are doing here. And until next time, have a great week and keep going. Serendipity, be confident, be clear, be clarity in what you do, and enjoy the rest of your week.